Welcome to the Bodacious Women in Cannabis podcast, the show where the bold and brilliant women cannabis business leaders share their journey and their expertise. Here's your host, Susan Burns.
Hello and welcome. I'm Susan Burns, your podcast host and your on-call business lawyer and founder of the boutique law firm S. Burns Legal in St. Paul, Minnesota. We support bodacious women in business on their journeys to success. And today, as part of our special Bodacious Women in Cannabis series, we have the privilege of hearing from and talking with Laura Monn Ginsburg and Leli Fatehi. These women are co-founders and partners of Blunt Strategies. Welcome, Laura and Leli.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to be here.
So tell us about Blunt Strategies. What is it? What do you do? And how did you start? And give us all the goodies.
Yeah, so Blunt Strategies is a full service 360-degree public affairs firm. And it is the first and only one that is dedicated specifically to the cannabis industry in the state of Minnesota and the surrounding areas. And so we do everything from strategic communications to government relations to legislative strategy, sort of whatever is needed in this uncertain and frequently changing environment.
It certainly is. You also do a newsletter, which I'm the beneficiary of.
Yes, so we have a newsletter called The Pre-Roll that is a tip sheet for those in the industry, and it puts out kind of the latest news and development and oftentimes gossip that is happening in the cannabis industry here in Minnesota. And there's a lot to cover, so that publication comes out a free issue every other week, and then a premium content issue every other week. And then during the legislative session, it'll be weekly, since we'll have lots more to report during that time.
I guess. Gossip in the cannabis industry. What? Tell me it's not true.
There is so much juicy gossip that happens in this cannabis industry, and especially when you are working at the nexus of not just the cannabis industry, but then public policy. It gets to bring in all of that juicy political gossip as well.
What was your inspiration to starting this firm? Because it's a rather unique approach, I would say.
Yeah, so we also have a public affairs firm called Apparatus, because we see ourselves as a little bit of that mousetrap board game, kind of moving different parts and components and fitting in. Yeah, it's a good visual. So we started Apparatus. Gosh, Leli, when did we start it? I have to remember now. 2017?
Years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And we've been doing a lot of great work in that space. When we finally had a governor who was campaigning on and then elected on cannabis legalization, expungement, and some of the social justice and equity things that we believed needed to happen alongside that in 2018, we started to think about how we could be activated and active in that fight and in that space. So starting in the legislative session in 2019, we were bringing ourselves and our voices and others' voices to the Capitol, doing some advocacy work there. And it became apparent to us that this was going to happen sooner or later, and we had a unique interest and a passion for the space. And we decided to spin off a division, which is Blunt Strategies. So that was May 2019, and we were already deeply in the thick of what was going on in Minnesota by that time. But it's been great for us to have a distinct brand and a distinct voice around this issue in this industry.
So Laura, personally, what do you find so interesting about this industry, and what drives you?
To me, it's really interesting to be on the cusp of something that has not yet happened in this state. We've seen cannabis legalization happen in many states in many ways, some good, some less good. And for us, we are a general benefit corporation. So we are a mission-driven organization. The work that we do advances social justice and equity and or environmental sustainability. And cannabis really covers all of those elements. So for us, it was really falling into a sweet spot of an industry that is new, it's burgeoning, it's still figuring itself out on different levels, whether it's federal, state, municipal, everywhere in between. And it was an opportunity to really decide the course of how it could be rolled out successfully, how it could be a craft industry here in Minnesota, and how we could do the most good with something that would be transformational in a lot of people's lives.
Nice. Leli, how about you? What personally drives you?
So in this space, much like Laura, what initially really attracted me to this area of policy work is how uncharted it is and how much opportunity there is. Not just opportunity, really obligation. Those who are at the table and making space for others at the table on the front end are going to be those that are influencing what the industry ultimately looks like. And it's really important to me that Minnesota's cannabis industry is reflective of Minnesota values, those values being values of equity, of some of the restorative justice that we know needs to happen. And certainly as being a state that has the benefit of seeing what has happened in other states that have legalized before us, making sure that cannabis legalization in Minnesota happens in a way that is to the benefit of Minnesota consumers and Minnesota entrepreneurs. Now, what really motivated us, though, to enter and start doing work in this space was Minnesota. I think when you look nationally, we really had a reputation for decades and decades as having some of the strongest leadership at the grassroots level. You don't end up with having two single issue legalization parties that have reached major party status without that strong leadership that we have had in this state since as early as the 60s and 70s in pushing these issues, where we saw, as Laura said, kind of an opportunity and a gap where we could bring some of our talents to bear in helping bring this along was more at the grass tops. When we saw Governor Walz elected after having campaigned with legalization as a platform issue, we realized that our own party, and we do run kind of a partisan shop, we are DFL aligned. Most of the work that we do has some nexus to the Democratic arm of the political spectrum. At the time that we entered, there was no unified bill the Democrats were rallying behind in Minnesota. Not even all Democrats were on board with the notion that legalization was a priority, that it was a social and racial justice issue, that this was the correct position to be taking on this. And we said, as people who have these relationships, who built up some political capital, who understand how things happen under the dome and how things happen electorally, let us kind of figure out where we can come in and not displace or be additive to where existing groups already have strength, but perhaps where we can bring a complementary skill set to bring this issue more to a head. And so that's what we focused on, and I think it did have an impact. We saw that first session that we were on the scene at the legislature. Finally, a cannabis legalization bill got a hearing. And then the next year, of course, we saw Representative Winkler introduce the first comprehensive legalization bill that an entire caucus fell behind. So, yeah, that's kind of what
it actually passed off the House.
It sure did. It went
floor.
through 15 committees and passed off the House floor. It was very exciting, but of course the work is still not done.
Well, I think as we've seen in the last legislative session with some very much needed amendments to statute, the work is, even when it's done, it's not done. It always seems like it's beginning. So I agree with you. It's an exciting, because it's uncharted, it makes it extra exciting. So in your business, since Blunt Strategies you started in 2019, how about some of your challenges since you started in your business? And you're actually the first power duo that I've had on the podcast. Do you have any conflicts between you, and how do you work those out, and how do you navigate your challenges?
We don't tend to have a ton of conflicts between the two of us. We've been working together now for the better part of 6 years, and I think we came together because we have a similar worldview, but very complementary, both skill sets and backgrounds, but also approaches to work. I don't think that this business or anything that we do, any of our accomplishments, any of our achievements, would be possible if it were just one of us and it's the two of us, but now it's also the three of us. We have a third principal, Kirsten Schuett, who is a brilliant organizer, someone that really kind of completes an important triad of skill sets. But no, we work really well collaboratively together. I'm often up in the clouds a bit, thinking far ahead forward as to what emerging issues may be and where there are gaps. And then Laura, who is a very pragmatic and grounded thinker, then makes the magic happen to pull those ideas out of the sky and turn them into things that actually move forward the dial and make a meaningful impact to the kind of client community that we serve.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that I know that I could not have achieved what our business has achieved, certainly not on my own, but not without somebody like Leli. I mean, I really think of it as like she's the architect and I'm the carpenter. And there's certainly times that we play both roles or we switch roles, but by and large, like she said, I mean, she gets these big ideas and really wants to push the envelope and think about yes-anding all of our current ideas and where could they go to the next level and how could they be bigger and different and make more of an impact. And I tend to live down in the weeds. I like to put processes on things. I like to figure out how to actually do them. And I think that's where we have great compliments. So like Leli said, we've certainly never disagreed on anything from a ideological standpoint or had any of those issues, thankfully. I can't imagine partnerships where you're at odds with somebody in that realm. And I think that whenever we have just had frustrations, we talk about them. And that's the best relationship advice for any relationship you have, any friendship, any spousal relationship, whatever it may be, is being open and honest and vulnerable with the other person when you have a strong feeling about something. And trusting in yourself and in them that they're going to hear you and acknowledge what you're saying and you can move forward and validate each other.
I like that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about challenges in business growth?
Yeah, it's a challenge operating a what is really a startup business in a field that is all startup businesses. The ground is moving constantly for cannabis businesses, and so we often are adapting the same way they are. It's a space where there is a lot of financial uncertainty. A lot of times we have clients that come to the table saying, what is it that we need to be doing? And it's kind of an open-ended thing, and then we need to kind of explore it with them. It's challenging, but necessary.
Yeah, and we deal in spaces that also tend to have cycles and seasons, and so that always presents its own special challenges. The legislative session is half of a year, more or less. The campaign season is, well, we know it's always happening, but the real ramp up is half of a year. And so there's a lot of excitement for us. I think Leli and I both really enjoy that every day is different, and there's always just kind of something new and a new thing that we need to kind of work our way through and figure our way out. And it does definitely add on top of what Leli was just saying about being in a nascent industry, to have these other factors that are kind of looming large and then essentially disappear for part of the year. It just adds an extra level of challenge in making sure that you are flexing with what's the actual context of what's going on around you.
And certainly something that would be of interest, I imagine, to your listener base is that we already operate in a world of politics and policy where there are gender dynamics that do not always benefit women in the industry. And then you layer on top of it a cannabis industry that similarly, I mean, I guess every industry you could largely make this claim of, but a cannabis industry where you have a lot of male peacocks walking around with their tails all afluff as well. And so that's definitely part of the dynamic as well.
And how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? What strategies do you employ? Give it to us bluntly.
Well, in a lot of instances, we put out the best and the strongest information that there is out there. We do some of the strongest professional work in this sector, and where there are clients that sometimes decide to put their trust elsewhere, and those who don't have necessarily the dedicated subject matter expertise, but are men and therefore command more trust, we often see them come back then a few months later saying, all right, yeah, no, it matters. You guys have actually done the work to understand the subject matter and build the relationships and whatnot. And the other thing we've done is really contribute to fostering a community of cannabis business women leaders, and we work closely with them. In Minnesota, we have a very strong community of women who work in the cannabis industry, either working directly with the plant at various points in the supply chain or in the ancillary industries, be it like yourself in law, others who do accounting, who do real estate, who do compliance, and then us who do public affairs. It's important to have those circles and to work with those communities.
And trite though it may sound, we believe in ourselves and believe in each other. And that really comes to bear when, as Leli was describing, there's folks around you and they might be, whether it's just a result of how the patriarchy functions or whatever else, they want to poke holes, they want to maybe be adversarial, they want to posture that
for your ideas.
Yep. Of course, we're always open to new information and changing our minds and adapting. And we don't waver when we know that we're the smartest ones in the room and that we have the right ideas and that we're on the right path. And that has been a really, I think, important part of our duo here, is being that cheering section for one another. And I think that has helped us be more formidable in this space and to stay the course and stay confident. And like Leli said, sometimes more often than not, we see people come around or ideas come around, or you said this thing that ended up being the thing that happened. And we're like, yeah, that's not by accident. So I think that's another big piece of it, especially if you're thinking about other bodacious business women and how to motivate them. Find a network. If you don't have one in your workplace or you're a solo operator, find someone and cheer them on and they'll cheer you back.
How would women in this community become engaged in your efforts in supporting women in the business, women's leadership, and being involved in as both a support and supporting?
Yeah, so we started the Minnesota Women's Cannabis Business Association a few years back, and that's been the primary way that we have brought other women in this industry together. And now it's so great to see there are so many more women who are helming their own groups or resource areas or building their own social networks in this space as well. And so what we try to do is share all of that. We are a more is more. There's room for everyone at the table. We don't see this as competitive as much as collaborative. So, we are sharing that stuff on our social media and elsewhere. And then if people wanted to get involved, certainly reaching out to us directly is always welcome.
Wondering, in your business so far, what's been the biggest unexpected benefit for you? Something like, wow, did you ever think we would have be doing this when we started?
I think that every day.
I guess for me, the thing that right now just has me incredibly excited is, as I said, when we started this, it was because we wanted to make sure that Minnesota would not just move in the direction of legalizing adult use cannabis, but that it would do so better than any other state before it had. And what Minnesota exceptionalism is a real thing. I really think that we are moving in the direction of Minnesota's cannabis industry looking completely different than the cannabis industry in any other state. And that is a confluence of what I think is just the culture and the ethic of people in Minnesota. I think it has to do with the fact that we've had kind of a lead time that has allowed some of our local hemp businesses to establish a kind of footing and grounding that is going to make them competitive and influential in terms of what the market formation looks like. That right now to me is the most exciting thing, that Minnesota, I mean, we really could be, and we're poised to be innovative in terms of what our cannabis market looks like. When you go to other states that have legalized adult use cannabis, the product by and large is still, the way it's regulated, the way it's sold, everything around it is structured as though this is a public health menace that needs to be controlled. And what we're really seeing in Minnesota is the development of a market that, of course, acknowledges the fact that there needs to be responsibility in public health and public safety mechanisms to make sure children are not getting access, that consumers are getting safe products, but it's not treating the product itself inherently as some kind of a dangerous vice. And even more importantly, it's not treating the individuals in the industry as being the dealers of some kind of vice. I think that's really important. And I'm glad to see it happening in our state and being able to push that.
I agree with you. I love that about Minnesota. I think we're doing a great job, and everything's not perfect for sure. There's a lot to be done, but it's pretty exciting, I think.
And and that's objectively being remarked on external to Minnesota as well. I mean, when Leli and I were ramping up our advocacy work and looking to learn from others and see what other states and organizations were up to, there was some skepticism of, I don't know if you guys are really going to do it anytime soon. I've heard it's a mess, whatever, some dismissiveness. And it has been transformational in the past few years, and to be a part of that and to really see it happen from a front row seat of being taken extremely seriously and having a loud voice nationally in this discussion and in discussions about how could this be done better. We're not fully there yet, and we kind of backed in oddly to what we have right now, but we're rolling with it. And there's so much excitement and exuberance in this industry from the industry itself to be at the forefront and to do this thing right. And that's been really exciting to me to see that it hasn't been a glide path, but we are really transforming the way that we are taken seriously in this industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. I've had inquiries from out-of-state manufacturers from legal states that they want in the Minnesota market, which is, I mean, I hear you like a lot of scoffing about Minnesota, flyover country, you'll never do it. And now they're like, oh, wait a minute, you like what you're doing there. So good for you too, for being in the midst of guiding this. So thank you for that. I think we have a little bit of an inkling on what makes you uniquely bodacious. But what do you think makes you uniquely bodacious?
I think that especially as a team, we are incredibly fearless. And when we have a vision for something, when we know something can be better than what it is, we set those ambitions big and rally people around that vision. I think the number of times we've jumped out of a plane and successfully built the parachute on the way down is kind of a testament to what our approach is.
Yeah, I think we just radically yes and each other as ideas happen. And even if we get ourselves totally out of the realm of possibility, we still allow ourselves to be creative and think about, okay, but what if we did this? What if we got this person to say yes to this thing? What if we had an event like this? And that has led us to a lot of exciting spaces that I don't think you get to if you're not being supported and you don't have somebody who is in your corner on your team saying, all right, let's try it and see what happens. And I think that is definitely something that feels unique to me. It feels unique to any other workspace that I have certainly ever been in.
Awesome. Well, we're so lucky to have you. And I know people are going to want to connect with you. So where can we find you as part of Blunt Strategies? Where do we find Minnesota Women's Cannabis Association? And give us the scoop.
So blunt-strategies.com is our website. Our emails are just simply Laura @ and Leli @ blunt-strategies.com. And the Minnesota Women's Cannabis Association, LinkedIn is probably the best place to go to join and follow what's going on there. But when in doubt, or when you have something that's a burning question, reaching out directly is always the best. We have a form on our website, or you can email us directly, and we love to pick up the phone and be involved and chat with people through their ideas and their challenges, and we never say no to that.